Hello everyone, hope you are doing well. In this video, I will explain about difference between exception, propagation and rethrowing exception in exception handling in Java. So let's get started. It is not a scratch video. It is continuation video of exception handling playlist. So first I will write some bullet points about exception, propagation and rethrowing exception. So first exception, propagation, exception, propagation here within a method if an exception raised and if that method does not handle that exception then exception object will be propagated to the caller. Then caller method is responsible to and that exceptions here exception propagation within a method if an exception is raised within a method if an exception is raised and if that method does not handle that exception then exception object will be propagated to the caller. Then caller method is responsible to handle that exceptions. So let's write some sample code. Here post within a method if an exception is raised. So this is one sentence, which is like a one sentence within a method if an exception is raised. So create a one method. That method should raise an exception. So about private static integer get int value here. Then suppose integer value equal to 10 divided by 0. We will get arithmetic exception, right? Return value. So in this method, we are getting exception, arithmetic exception, but we are not handling. Here, within a method, if an exception is raised, and if that method does not handle that exception. So here one exception is raising, but we are not handled. So then exception object will be propagated to the caller. Then caller method is responsible to handle that exceptions. Then caller method is responsible to handle that exceptions. So this is the caller method. So this method exception. So this get int value method exception where propagated to this main method. So we are propagated. This is the caller method. This get into value. This method exception are so both exceptions are propagated to the main method. Main method are caller method. Main method are caller method. So this is static method, right? We can call through class name dot get into value. It will return integer response. So if you want to print this value xy as well, system.out println response. Here let's within a method if an exception is raised and if that method does not handle that exceptions. So here in this method exception is rising, but we are not handling this exception. After that, then exception object will be propagated to the caller. Then caller method is responsibility to handle that exception. So caller method is responsibility to handle that exception. Then and here I am using try block. So try catch. I am mentioning arithmetic exception. Ex reference variable. So I am printing. Here I am printing ex dot toString. ToString will print name of the exception. Why this exception is raised. Description of the exception. Right click. run as Java application. Here, this is the name of the exception is raised arithmetic exception. Y raised divided by 0. Because of the slash divided by 0, this region exception is raised. So copy this code. So example code. After that, here in diagram, this one, rethrowing exception. So rethrowing, rethrowing exception, rethrowing exception to convert the one type of exception to another type of exception. What is exception? Rethrowing exception to convert the one type of exception to another type of exception is called exception rethrowing. For that example, here, so here we are raising, this is the try block in catch block, arithmetic exception is raising, so I am rethrowing. So rethrowing exception throw new, suppose null pointer exception. I am throwing null pointer exception. So here ex dot get message, ex dot do one thing, ex dot to string, it will print, then it will print description and see, it will print description and name of the exception. So rethrowing exception. If you want to rethrow any exception, we need to add like this, rethrowing exception. So let's run. Right click, run as Java application. Here we are getting arithmetic exception. We are rethrowing to null pointer exception. See, right? Copy this code. Control C. Example. Control V. Let's recall this one. Difference between exception propagation and rethrowing exception in exception handling in core Java. So here exception. This is the exception propagation. Within a method, if an exception is raised, here we have developed one method to raise an exception. We are using 10/0. It will be raising one exception within a method. If an exception is raised in this method, exception is raised, right? And if that method does not handle that exceptions, so we are not handling any exception here, then exception object will be propagated to the caller. Caller means we are calling that method, get into value method, we are calling in main method. Then exception object will be propagated to the caller, then caller is responsibility to handle that exception. So caller method is responsibility to handle that exception. Here it is a caller method. This get into value method exceptions are propagated to the main method or caller method. So this caller method is responsibility to handle the exception. So we are added try block. In try block we are calling get into value. This method will raise an exception. So we are placed in try block. After that we are handling through catch block. So this is we are successfully understand, right? After that rethrowing exception to convert the one type of exception to another type of exception is called rethrowing an exception. Here in try block some code is there. We are handling the catch block. After that we are rethrowing exception. To rethrowing exception we are using throw new null pointer exception. This is means rethrowing exception. This line means rethrowing exception. Thank you for watching. For more videos please subscribe to this YouTube channel.